Alright, well, welcome to my third and final video on the Okinawan Sai. And I got the idea from this training session I did with a lot of the ones that you're looking at here. And now we've covered the basics and some extras, so we can get in a little bit more and really round this out. Because the Sai have an interesting variation, well, they have more than one, but the most interesting and well-known is the Manji or Nunte Sai, also called the Yin-Yang Sai. That being an informal name, of course. Now, the defining characteristic here is that one yoku, prong, goes up, sweeps up, and the other sweeps down. Now, the pair that we're going to examine here have an additional feature, which is that the shafts are symmetrical, so you don't have a short handle and then a long striking or stabbing shaft. See that? This really changes the game up. When it's like what we're looking at right here, except one end is just more of the short traditional handle, then obviously the only difference is the way one guard sweeps down, and you'd want that one generally to wrap around your knuckles. That gives you better hand protection, but you sacrifice some of the trapping and catching ability. That simple change adds more complexity than you think, especially if you're switching grips, which you do a lot in these katas. You're kind of moving it around into different positions. Then you have to be real cognizant of which way you're holding it, or you're going to end up kind of in reverse. That, however, is child's play compared to this version of the Manjir Nunte Sai, because obviously you've got two striking ends, both of which serve as handles, so you can grab either one, but the balance is really, really odd with this one. In fact, I have a very hard time thinking of a melee weapon where so much of the weapon, of the item, is behind your hand, as it is here, and maybe that's why it feels so counterintuitive. In terms of a one-handed weapon, I should say. And, if both ends of this are sharp, then you're also risking poking yourself. So, what is the point of having something like this? Well, a couple reasons, but the main one, as I was taught anyway, is for throwing. Sai are very handy for throwing, as we've mentioned, but like any kind of thrown dagger or spike, anything like that that only has one, quote-unquote deadly end, you have kind of a 1 in 8 chance. Think about like the points on a compass, like north, northwest, that kind of thing. Essentially, you have like a 1 in 8 chance. Well, you're doubling your odds if both ends are sharp. You also have a perfectly balanced weapon, which makes for a more predictable throw. It takes some time to get used to a sai, because it's, kind of purposely imbalanced, and it throws well, but you've got to account for that. Here, you don't. There's no compensation necessary. And here you can see where my grip is using the, downward sweeping yoku to protect my hand, like we talked about. And then here's kind of the standard punching position, and it's really odd because you've got that second shaft really kind of running down your arm. But you would still be able to jab with it quite effectively. Once the picture scrolls up a little bit more, you'll see that it's almost just it's a traditional sai held in the punching position. And because this is two-sided in terms of a, puncturing point, what would have been a standard reverse punch hitting with the pommel is now a piercing thrust. All that being said, I believe once you have one of these out in hand, you are looking to throw it. And the person on the receiving end of that is in real trouble here, as either end can completely impale them. You might recall that one of the names I mentioned for these is Nunte Sai. Well, a Nunte bow in Japanese is a staff. A Nunte bow is basically a wooden staff that has one of these on the end, so it's a polearm. Now, it's kind of interesting, sometimes they would just have to lash these to a staff. If you're really making do and didn't have access to a weapons maker and didn't have the skills yourself, then you would just resort to that. So you can almost think of this as the head of a polearm that's just separated from the shaft. And maybe that's how it first developed, who knows? There is a lot of conjecture and very little historical record when it comes to the history of the development of the sai. And speaking of the nunte bow, according to my teacher, one of the common kind of carrying combinations was to have a nunte bow and a nunte sai like this. So you throw the sai, and then you grasp your staff weapon with both hands, and that's a very formidable combination. And since this is part 3 of my overview, let me show how the shaft here runs along the forearm, and that gives you kind of your blocking shield when held in that position. I don't think I've done that yet. Now here, just to show the variety, here's another pair that we used that day, and then the training day that inspired these 3 videos. Look how thin these are, and they are not extra long. So these are really light, delicate, thin. Well, you're holding a pair like this, I think it's really a puncturing, piercing weapon then. I don't see, using the broad strokes and swipes. that we trained with so much that day. So it just kind of depends, your fighting technique is going to be dictated by the weapon a little bit, the exact pair of sai that you happen to be holding. So here I am, and here's a real common sai form position. You've got one leg up, and as your leg goes up, the sai goes down. So any of you who know sai kata will know where I'm headed here with this move. I personally think the reason the leg raise / low block is so common in sai kata is because that's where your opponent's likely to attack if he has a long weapon. Sai are short, and that's going to be where you're going to have the toughest time defending yourself. They're really strong defensively in kind of the upper body type area, especially anytime you can make kind of an X pattern and catch the opposing weapon. It's great. You're in business. So since I review antique weapons often, let's go with my actual sai, since I've had these, they're antiques too. I've had these since the mid-90s, and just look at the wear and tear. Look at the finish coming off the metal. And there on the moto, that's just from my thumb. There's so many years getting pressed up against there. And as we get down to the shaft here, I mangled that pronunciation once in my first video, so I'm not going to do it again. You can just see the countless dings from just years and years of training. This thing's got a lot of miles on it. When you see the point, it's funny. The color really comes off, and that's because it's been thrown into the dirt so many times. And I'm going to restrain myself because there's more I'd like to say about the sai, but I think that's a good overview. Those 3 videos hopefully give you an indication of how interesting and sophisticated these weapons are. That's my son's 6-year-old hand, by the way, pointing at the collection. He and his 10-year-old sister hung out in an air-conditioned less dojo on a 100-degree day for 2 hours while I trained with these. That is the Okinawan Sai. There's a lot that's open to interpretation because their history is so just ambiguous and hazy. Even though their heyday was not that long ago, by the way, this is not an ancient weapon in that sense. But, like I said, because of that, there's a lot that's open to interpretation. This was my take. I love this weapon. It's one of my favorites. And thanks.